Okay, calm down.
Your piece goes through a couple of incidents, examples of AOC's kind of maybe like worst moments. And you're one of the, I think the critiques that is pretty undeniable is that she is not consistent in her use of symbolism, right? So you give examples of how she makes a symbolic vote sometimes, makes a non-symbolic vote other times. Can you kind of trace that for viewers and listeners?
Yeah, so to pick an example, I believe it was late last year, she was the single dissenting Democrat from an omnibus spending bill that the Biden administration pushed forward. There was no meaningful protest energy behind this or against this bill, but I think she said that she did it because it was contributing to the war machine or something, which is interesting because she's been a stalwart supporter of the Biden administration's efforts in Ukraine. So she's perfectly willing. I mean, so she was the only Democratic House member who voted against this bill. So she's perfectly willing to burn a vote when she can't possibly win to show where her allegiance lies. But the famous case is there was a vote to fund the Iron Dome, which is Israel's quote unquote defense shield, which, like very, very much of the Israeli military apparatus, is funded by the United States. And this was seen appropriately as a referendum on the Palestinian question. A tiny number of people in Congress were talking about voting no in order to demonstrate that the United States commitment to Israel should not be unlimited. AOC ends up crying on the floor of Congress, presumably out of concern and in solidarity with the Palestinians. And then she then goes ahead and votes present on the bill, right? So if you're unaware, members of Congress can vote aye or nay, or they can vote present, which is just to say, I'm marking my vote, but I'm not choosing either side. And as I said in the piece, it just makes no sense, right? Like, if the point is to express solidarity with Palestinians, you vote no. If the point is to try to triangulate and court favor with, hardcore supporters of Israel, which, by the way, you're AOC, they're never, ever going to support you anyway. But if you wanted to do that, you would vote yes. Voting present is just incoherent. It makes no sense, right? And it's one of those moments where it's just like, I'm not attributing malice to it because it's so weird. It's like I just wonder, is there anyone in her camp who advises her about these things, right? I think the even more serious bill is the one where she voted to break a strike for the railroad unions following the East Palestine disaster. I just have some sort of red letter, you cannot cross this line things as a political mind and as a political entity, because those are my values. Bernie Sanders also voted to break the strike. I've taken a ton of shit from people in the months since then because I've been much more critical of Bernie and telling people look, these are my values. He violated the most basic value that I have almost in terms of what you can and can't do as a politician. And it's a big deal to me. If you look at this UPS situation, the Teamsters were able to get a much better deal for the UPS workers than they had initially been offered by UPS. I mean, just like a significantly better deal. And they were able to get that better deal because they had the threat of a strike. And a strike would have cost UPS hundreds of millions of dollars. And so if you, as someone who identifies as a socialist or a radical or whatever, you say, oh, I'm going to forbid you from striking as a legislator. To me, that's just game over, right? Now, you can tell me that that's, my values are wrong, right? Or that's the wrong way to feel, fine. What I resent about the whole sort of AOC discourse is there's a refusal to sort of hold her to account for anything like this. right?
Right.
Like, it's just so often it's just, you know, oh, AOC is our cool socialist celebrity who plays video games with, you know, Hassan Piker, right?
Yeah.
Like that's her identity. She's the cool girl in the socialist world. So just don't criticize her. And the premise of the piece was to say maybe we should actually evaluate her as a legislator. And you know, unfortunately, most of the response to the piece didn't engage with that at all.
I feel like we see it kind of on both sides. There are people who are total AOC apologists and she can do no wrong. And then there are people who are really AOC haters and she can do no right. So every time she does something right, it's for some ulterior motive.
Right.
And what's ironic is that both people on both sides of that like to proclaim that they're real leftists. But
Right.
the analysis is so parasocial almost. It's
Right.
so devoid of structural analysis or an analysis of power that I just think it shows how desperate we are in some ways for heroes.
Right. I mean, look, like I have a network that has a fair number of people. They're almost all older, not all of them, but almost all older, an older school. People who are sort of the kind of lefties who just think that partisan politics writ large is just a dog and pony show. It's the sort of battle to determine which representative of the ruling class will represent the ruling class's interests. And there's no point in ever getting excited about any Democrat, you know. And that's a position that has frequently frustrated me throughout the years. And I'm not in that camp, but it makes a lot of sense, right? In other words, I think that it's a mistake to wipe your hands of partisan politics, electoral politics, because it is a locus of power. And we can't afford not to, like, at least try to take advantage of that sort of means of getting power. But it's a perfectly sort of internally consistent position, and they often look very prescient over time, right? Like Obama, again, you know, I think people forget that Obama in 2008 ran on a campaign of hope and change, and he was the transformational person, and he was going to restore, and people were so desperate after the awful Bush years to believe in it. And then he turned out to be a, you know, sensible centrist who, by the way, is sending a drone strike to kill everybody at an Afghani wedding, you know. In those scenarios, these people who are totally rejecting electoral politics look very prescient, right? I think one thing that happened with Bernie is that the sort of wing of people on the left, a lot of people who had really given up on partisan politics were sort of pulled back in, right? I will always believe and still believe strongly that the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign was worth the risks. It was worth the effort. It was a noble fight. I'm happy to have voted for Bernie twice in primaries. And as I say in the piece, I have personal affection for him.
Yeah.
But I think what's happening now is it's been 7 years since the first Bernie campaign. We don't have a lot to show for it. And I think a lot of the people who sort of got pulled back towards the electoral politics are sort of saying, oh, right, this is why I was never a part of this in the first place, right? This is why I wiped my hands of this years ago, because they always fuck us eventually, and you can't get your hopes up about this sort of thing.